Karoline Leavitt wasn't always in the spotlight. In fact, just a few years ago, she was like many others, working tirelessly behind the scenes to make her dreams come true. Born and raised in a small town, Karoline grew up with a deep love for storytelling. Her parents often joked that she could talk circles around anyone at family gatherings, spinning tales that kept everyone glued to their seats. But what set Karoline apart wasn't just her knack for storytelling, it was her hunger for truth. She believed that stories had the power to change lives, if told honestly. From a young age, Karoline devoured books about history, politics, and human rights. She admired journalists who dared to ask tough questions and hold those in power accountable. To her, journalism wasn't just a job, it was a calling. After graduating from college with honors, she moved to the city to chase her dream. At first, things were far from glamorous. She worked long hours as an intern, fetching coffee and transcribing interviews while trying to prove herself in a competitive industry. Nights were spent hunched over her laptop, researching leads and writing articles no one else wanted to tackle. It wasn't easy, but Karoline refused to give up. Her big break came unexpectedly. While covering a local protest against government corruption, Karoline noticed something unusual, a senior official slipping away unnoticed during a heated exchange. Sensing there might be more to the story, she dug deeper. Days turned into weeks as she pieced together evidence of misconduct that shocked even her seasoned colleagues. When her exposé was published, it went viral overnight. Suddenly, people started paying attention, not just to the scandal but also to the young journalist behind it. Karoline's name began appearing in headlines, and offers from prominent news organizations flooded in. Despite her growing fame, Karoline remained grounded. She knew success didn't mean compromising her values. Instead of chasing sensational stories, she focused on issues that truly mattered: inequality, transparency, and justice. Her work earned her respect among peers and admiration from readers. However, not everyone appreciated her rise to prominence. Some saw her as a threat, a fresh voice challenging the status quo. They whispered behind closed doors, dismissing her achievements as beginner's luck or mere coincidence. But Karoline paid them little mind. She understood that every field had its skeptics, and proving doubters wrong only fueled her determination further. One day, an invitation arrived that would test her resolve like never before. Karoline was asked to attend a high-profile congressional hearing on government transparency. The event promised to bring together some of the most influential figures in politics, including Representative Schiff, a man known for his sharp intellect and commanding presence. For Karoline, this was both an opportunity and a challenge. She prepared meticulously, reviewing documents, rehearsing questions, and mentally bracing herself for whatever might happen. Little did she know, this hearing would mark a turning point in her life. As Karoline entered the packed auditorium, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. The room buzzed with anticipation, filled with reporters, lawmakers, and curious citizens eager to hear what the day would reveal. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every move, every expression. When it was finally her turn to step up to the microphone, she took a deep breath and reminded herself of why she was there: to seek answers, to demand accountability, and to amplify the voices of ordinary people. But as she introduced herself and posed her question, she couldn't help but notice the smirk spreading across Schiff's face. Schiff leaned forward slightly, his tone dripping with sarcasm as he addressed her. "Ms. Leavitt, isn't it?" he began, drawing laughter from a few corners of the room. "Forgive me if I'm not familiar with your work. You're relatively new to this arena, aren't you? Perhaps you'll need to explain your question again, in simpler terms." The jab landed hard, cutting through the tension like a knife. For a fleeting moment, Karoline felt the sting of dismissal. Doubts crept into her mind. Was she out of her depth? Had she misjudged her readiness for such a stage? But then, something remarkable happened. As the murmurs in the room grew louder, and all eyes turned to her, Karoline realized this was her moment. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed because they didn't fit the mold. With renewed clarity, she straightened her posture, gripped the microphone firmly, and prepared to respond. Whatever came next, she vowed, would be unforgettable. The room seemed to freeze after Adam Schiff's dismissive comment. Karoline could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, some filled with pity, others with curiosity, and a few with amusement. The air was thick with tension, like the calm before a storm. For a moment she wondered if she should let the remark slide, nod politely, and retreat into the background. After all, standing up to someone as powerful and respected as Adam Schiff wasn't something most people would dare to do, especially not in front of a live audience and countless cameras. But deep down, Karoline knew that staying silent wasn't an option. This wasn't just about her pride. It was about proving that everyone deserved a voice, no matter how small or inexperienced they might seem. Karoline took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying herself against the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She glanced around the room, taking in the sea of faces watching her every move. Some reporters scribbled notes furiously, while others leaned forward, eager to see how she would respond. A few members of the audience exchanged whispers, their expressions ranging from concern to anticipation. Karoline reminded herself why she was there, to ask questions that mattered, to hold those in power accountable, and to ensure that the voices of ordinary citizens weren't drowned out by political jargon and arrogance. With this clarity, she felt a spark of courage ignite within her. Adam Schiff's smirk lingered on his face, as if he were confident that his words had struck the intended blow. He probably expected her to stumble over her next sentence, to mumble an apology, or to awkwardly move on. But Karoline wasn't about to play along. Instead, she met his gaze directly, her brown eyes steady and unwavering. She realized that this moment wasn't just about answering his question. It was about showing the world that being underestimated didn't mean you were powerless. It was about turning a potentially humiliating situation into an opportunity to shine. As the seconds ticked by, the silence in the room grew heavier. Everyone waited for Karoline to say something, anything. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, but clear. "Congressman Schiff," she began, choosing her words carefully. "I understand your point. I am new to this arena, and I won't pretend otherwise." The admission caught many off guard. It wasn't what they expected from someone who had just been mocked. Some reporters raised their eyebrows, intrigued by her unexpected humility. Even Schiff seemed momentarily taken aback, though his expression quickly shifted back to one of mild amusement. "But here's the thing," Karoline continued, her tone gaining strength with each word. "Being new doesn't mean I'm uninformed or unprepared. If anything, it gives me a fresh perspective, one that isn't clouded by years of navigating political complexities or playing the game according to predetermined rules." Her voice carried a quiet conviction that resonated throughout the room. People stopped whispering and leaned closer, captivated by her response. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing every nuance of her expression. For the first time since the hearing began, all attention was focused solely on Karoline. She paused briefly, allowing her words to sink in. Then she added, "Sometimes, Congressman, experience can become a double-edged sword. Those of us who are newer to the scene bring something different to the table. We bring curiosity, authenticity, and a willingness to challenge assumptions, and perhaps that's exactly what we need right now." The final sentence hung in the air, bold and undeniable. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by murmurs of approval. Reporters exchanged glances, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Adam Schiff's smirk faltered ever so slightly. He hadn't anticipated such a composed and thoughtful rebuttal. For a man accustomed to commanding respect and dominating conversations, this was unfamiliar territory. Still, he recovered quickly, attempting to brush off her comments with a vague nod and a muttered acknowledgement. But the damage, or rather, the impact, had already been done. Karoline's response wasn't just a defense of her credibility. It was a statement about the value of diverse perspectives in journalism and politics alike. The ripple effects of her words were immediate. Social media platforms lit up almost instantly, with clips of the exchange spreading like wildfire. Viewers at home watched in awe as Karoline stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated by a seasoned politician. Comment sections buzzed with praise for her poise and intelligence. "Who is this woman?" one tweet read. "She just schooled Adam Schiff," another proclaimed. Memes featuring her determined expression began circulating online, turning her into an overnight sensation. Even veteran journalists weighed in, applauding her ability to turn a potentially embarrassing moment into a defining one. Back in the hearing room, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Other reporters looked at Karoline with newfound admiration, realizing that she had managed to accomplish what many of them wouldn't have dared to try. Some even whispered congratulations as she returned to her seat, still processing what had just happened. Meanwhile, Schiff appeared distracted, flipping through papers and avoiding further eye contact. Though he tried to maintain his composure, it was evident that Karoline's response had rattled him more than he cared to admit. For Karoline, the experience was both exhilarating and humbling. On one hand, she felt a surge of pride knowing that she had handled the situation with grace and dignity. On the other hand, she recognized that this was only the beginning. The spotlight was now firmly on her, and with it came immense responsibility. She couldn't afford to rest on her laurels or let this moment define her entirely. Instead, she vowed to use it as fuel to continue pushing boundaries, asking tough questions, and advocating for transparency and accountability. As the hearing drew to a close, Karoline stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. Reporters swarmed around her, eager to hear more about her thoughts on the day's events. She smiled politely, answering their questions with the same calm confidence she had displayed earlier. Inside, however, her mind raced with possibilities. She knew that her life and career would never be the same after today. What started as a routine assignment had transformed into a pivotal chapter in her journey, one that would inspire countless others to believe in the power of resilience and authenticity. Little did Karoline know, this was just the beginning of a much larger story, a story that would challenge her in ways she couldn't yet imagine but also affirm everything she stood for. The aftermath of Karoline's response to Adam Schiff was nothing short of electric. As the hearing concluded and the room began to empty, the buzz around her continued to grow. Reporters who had initially dismissed her as a newcomer now scrambled to introduce themselves, eager to learn more about the woman who had dared to stand up to one of the most influential politicians in the country. Some praised her composure under pressure. Others marveled at her ability to turn a potentially embarrassing moment into a powerful statement. But amidst the flurry of attention, Karoline remained remarkably grounded. She knew that while her words had resonated with many, the real test lay ahead. How would she use this newfound platform to make a difference? Outside the hearing room, a group of journalists gathered around her, firing off questions faster than she could answer them. "What inspired your response?" one asked. "Did you expect such a reaction?" another pressed. Karoline smiled warmly, taking a moment to collect her thoughts before responding. "To be honest," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I didn't plan my response word for word. I just knew I couldn't stay silent. When someone doubts you, it's easy to feel small, but I chose to see it as an opportunity to speak up for everyone who has ever been underestimated." Her words struck a chord with those listening. Many nodded in agreement, recognizing the universal truth in what she was saying. Being underestimated wasn't unique to Karoline. It was something countless people experienced every day, whether in their careers, personal lives, or communities. And yet, here was someone who had refused to let doubt define her, choosing instead to rise above it with grace and conviction. Her courage inspired others to reflect on their own battles and consider how they too could push past obstacles. As news outlets replayed clips of the exchange throughout the day, social media erupted with support for Karoline. Hashtags like Karoline Leavitt and Our Fresh Perspective trended nationwide, accompanied by thousands of posts celebrating her boldness. Memes featuring her composed expression alongside captions like, "When you're told you don't belong but prove them wrong," flooded timelines. Even late-night talk show hosts joked about the incident, praising Karoline's quick wit and unshakable confidence. It seemed as though everyone, from seasoned reporters to casual viewers, was talking about her. But not everyone was pleased. In political circles, whispers of discontent began to circulate. Some allies of Adam Schiff dismissed Karoline's comments as mere theatrics, accusing her of grandstanding for attention. Others argued that her lack of experience made her unfit to challenge someone of Schiff's stature. Yet these criticisms only fueled public interest in her story. Supporters rallied behind her, countering skeptics with reminders that fresh voices were essential for progress. They pointed out that innovation and change often came from outsiders willing to question the status quo, a sentiment Karoline herself had echoed during her now famous rebuttal. For Adam Schiff, the situation proved unexpectedly challenging. Known for his sharp intellect and polished demeanor, he rarely found himself on the defensive. But Karoline's response had struck a nerve, forcing him to confront the reality that underestimating someone based on their age or experience could backfire spectacularly. His office issued a brief statement later that evening, downplaying the incident as a minor exchange and emphasizing his commitment to transparency. However, the damage to his image was undeniable. Critics seized the opportunity to accuse him of arrogance, questioning whether his dismissive tone reflected broader attitudes within the political establishment. Meanwhile, Karoline returned home that night to find her phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. Messages poured in from friends, family, colleagues, and even strangers, all expressing admiration for her poise and determination. One message stood out, a note from a young journalism student who wrote, "Seeing you stand up to someone so powerful gives me hope that I can do the same someday. Thank you for showing us that being new doesn't mean being invisible." Reading those words brought tears to Karoline's eyes. She realized that her actions had resonated far beyond the confines of the hearing room, touching lives and inspiring others to believe in their potential. The next morning, invitations began arriving from major networks and publications eager to feature her insights. Talk shows wanted her to share her perspective on government accountability. Magazines requested interviews exploring her journey as a rising journalist. Karoline accepted some offers but declined others, mindful of maintaining her authenticity. In a world where fame could easily overshadow substance, she understood that staying true to her values was crucial, not just for her career, but for the message she hoped to convey. One particularly memorable invitation came from a grassroots organization dedicated to promoting civic engagement among young people. They asked Karoline to deliver a keynote speech at their annual conference, highlighting the importance of asking tough questions and holding leaders accountable. Accepting the offer, Karoline poured her heart into preparing her remarks. On the day of the event, she walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, greeted by a sea of enthusiastic faces. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Every single one of us has a role to play in shaping the future," she said, her voice steady and impassioned. "It doesn't matter if you're a journalist, a teacher, a parent, or a student. What matters is that you care enough to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and demand answers. Don't let anyone tell you that your voice doesn't matter, because it does. Change starts when we refuse to stay silent, even when it feels uncomfortable or risky." Her words ignited a standing ovation, with attendees chanting her name as she stepped off the stage. For Karoline, the moment reinforced why she had chosen this path: to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard, and to remind people that they had the power to create change. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges along the way. But as she looked out at the crowd, filled with individuals inspired to take action, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. The ripple effects of her response to Adam Schiff would continue to unfold in ways she couldn't yet imagine, opening doors to opportunities and sparking conversations that transcended borders and industries. Karoline Leavitt had become more than just a journalist. She was now a symbol of resilience, authenticity, and the transformative power of speaking truth to power. And as the world watched, waiting to see what she would do next, one thing was certain: She was ready to embrace whatever came her way. In the days following her unforgettable exchange with Adam Schiff, Karoline Leavitt's life transformed in ways she could never have anticipated. What had started as a single moment of defiance quickly snowballed into a whirlwind of attention, opportunities, and challenges. The media frenzy surrounding her name showed no signs of slowing down, and Karoline found herself thrust into the national spotlight, a position that came with both rewards and responsibilities. As clips of her rebuttal continued to dominate, news cycles, talk shows scrambled to book her as a guest. Morning television anchors introduced her as the journalist who stood up to power, while late-night comedians crafted jokes around her poise and wit. Social media platforms buzzed with memes and hashtags celebrating her courage, and grassroots movements embraced her as a symbol of fresh perspectives challenging entrenched systems. Her inbox overflowed with messages from strangers, sharing how her story inspired them to speak up in their own lives. One email in particular stood out. It was from a high school teacher who wrote, "I showed your response to my students today. They were so moved by your bravery that they started discussing how they can make a difference in their community. Thank you for being a role model." Yet, amidst the praise and admiration, there were also critics. Some accused her of seeking fame or exploiting the situation for personal gain. Others dismissed her as a flash-in-the-pan sensation, predicting that her newfound popularity would fade as quickly as it had emerged. Skeptics questioned whether she had the experience to back up her bold stance, suggesting that her words might be more style than substance. For Karoline, these criticisms weren't entirely unexpected, but they still stung. She knew that stepping into the limelight meant inviting scrutiny, but she refused to let negativity derail her focus. Instead, she channeled the energy into proving her detractors wrong, not through arguments or counterattacks, but through action. One of the most significant invitations Karoline received came from a major cable news network. They offered her a recurring segment called Voices Unheard, where she would highlight stories of ordinary people making extraordinary impacts in their communities. It was an opportunity perfectly aligned with her values, and she accepted without hesitation. Each episode took her to a different corner of the country, introducing viewers to individuals fighting for justice, equality, and change. From a single mother advocating for affordable housing to a group of teenagers cleaning up polluted rivers, Karoline brought these stories to life with the same passion and authenticity that defined her earlier work. Audiences connected deeply with the series, praising its heartfelt storytelling and unflinching honesty. Karoline's growing influence didn't go unnoticed by political circles either. Lawmakers who had once ignored her emails now sought her opinion on policy matters, hoping to align themselves with her rising star. Grassroots organizations invited her to speak at rallies, crediting her with reigniting public interest in accountability and transparency. Even some of her harshest critics began softening their tone, acknowledging that her presence in the media landscape brought much-needed diversity of thought. Yet, despite the accolades, Karoline remained vigilant about staying true to herself. She turned down lucrative offers from brands seeking endorsements, fearing that commercializing her image might compromise her integrity. "If I lose sight of why I started this journey," she told a close friend, "then none of this will matter." The ripple effects of her confrontation with Adam Schiff extended far beyond Karoline's personal career. Her response sparked broader conversations about the importance of fresh voices in journalism and politics. Panels and think tanks debated whether traditional gatekeepers were stifling innovation by sidelining newcomers. Young journalists, inspired by her example, began speaking out more boldly in their own reporting, challenging authority figures and pushing for greater transparency. In classrooms across the nation, professors used her exchange with Schiff as a case study in effective communication and resilience under pressure. Karoline's name became synonymous with standing firm in the face of adversity. For Adam Schiff, the fallout was subtler but no less impactful. While he maintained his composure publicly, insiders noted a shift in his approach during subsequent hearings. He appeared more cautious when addressing reporters, avoiding remarks that could be perceived as dismissive or condescending. His team worked overtime to mitigate the backlash, releasing statements emphasizing his commitment to fostering open dialogue. Yet the incident lingered as a reminder of the dangers of underestimating anyone, especially someone determined to prove their worth. Back home, Karoline tried to maintain a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. Friends joked that her apartment resembled a newsroom, with papers scattered across every surface and her laptop perpetually open. Despite the long hours and constant demands, she carved out time for self-care, knowing that burnout would only hinder her ability to continue making a difference. She spent evenings journaling, reflecting on her journey, and setting goals for the future. One entry read, "This is just the beginning. There's so much more to do, so many more voices to amplify. I won't let fear or doubt stop me." Her resolve was tested when a prominent news outlet published a scathing op-ed questioning her qualifications. The article accused her of riding a wave of viral fame without contributing anything substantial to the field of journalism. Reading the Schiff piece felt like a punch to the gut, but instead of responding defensively, Karoline decided to let her work speak for itself. Over the next few weeks, she released a series of investigative reports exposing corruption in local governments, earning widespread acclaim for her meticulous research and compelling storytelling. Critics who had doubted her abilities were forced to reconsider their stance, and allies rallied even more strongly behind her. Through it all, Karoline stayed grounded by remembering why she had chosen this path in the first place. Journalism wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about giving a voice to those who felt powerless, shining a light on injustices, and holding leaders accountable. Every interview, every article, every speech reinforced her belief that truth and transparency mattered more than ever in a world increasingly divided by misinformation and apathy. And while the road ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles and unknowns, Karoline faced it with unwavering determination. By the time the dust settled, one thing was clear. Karoline Leavitt was no longer just a journalist. She was a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope for countless individuals yearning to make a difference. Her response to Schiff hadn't just altered her trajectory, it had ignited a movement, inspiring others to embrace their unique perspectives and challenge the status quo. As she looked toward the future, Karoline knew that the real test lay not in sustaining her success, but in using it to create lasting impact. And if her journey thus far was any indication, she was ready to rise to the occasion. Months had passed since Karoline Leavitt's unforgettable exchange with Schiff, and the ripple effects of that moment continued to shape not only her life, but also the broader landscape of journalism and public discourse. What began as a single sentence, a carefully chosen rebuttal delivered under immense pressure, had evolved into something far greater, a movement fueled by authenticity, courage, and the belief that fresh voices could challenge even the most entrenched systems. Karoline's transformation from a relatively unknown journalist to a household name was nothing short of remarkable. Yet she remained fiercely committed to staying grounded despite the accolades and opportunities flooding her way. She often reminded herself of the values that had guided her from the start: truth, accountability, and amplifying the stories of those who felt unheard. These principles became the foundation upon which she built her next chapter, a journey marked by bold decisions, meaningful connections, and an unwavering commitment to making a difference. One of the most defining moments of this period came when Karoline launched her own independent media platform, aptly named The New Perspective. It wasn't just another news outlet. It was a space designed to give voice to underrepresented communities and tackle issues often overlooked by mainstream media. From investigative reports on systemic inequality to heartfelt profiles of everyday heroes working tirelessly to improve their neighborhoods, The New Perspective quickly gained traction among readers hungry for authentic storytelling. Karoline poured every ounce of her energy into the project, ensuring that each piece published reflected her dedication to integrity and impact. The launch event for The New Perspective was held in a modest community center rather than a glitzy venue, an intentional choice meant to underscore its mission of accessibility and inclusivity. Hundreds of people attended, including grassroots activists, educators, artists, and journalists inspired by Karoline's vision. As she took the stage to deliver her opening remarks, the room fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. "This isn't about me," she began, her voice steady and sincere. "It's about all of us, the teachers, the caregivers, the dreamers, the fighters, who believe in the power of truth to drive change. Together we can rewrite the narrative." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom approached her afterward to express gratitude for creating a platform that truly represented them. One woman tearfully shared how reading one of the New Perspective's early articles had inspired her to start advocating for environmental justice in her hometown. Another man recounted how seeing his community's struggles highlighted in a feature story had reignited his hope for progress. These interactions reinforced Karoline's belief that storytelling had the power to connect, inspire, and mobilize people toward action. As the New Perspective grew in popularity, so did its influence. Major publications began citing its investigative pieces, while policymakers referenced its data-driven reports during debates. Karoline's team expanded to include talented writers, editors, and researchers who shared her passion for uncovering truths and challenging assumptions. Despite the growing demands of running a successful media venture, Karoline made it a point to mentor young journalists, encouraging them to embrace their unique perspectives and never shy away from asking tough questions. "Your voice matters," she would tell them. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But success didn't come without challenges. Critics accused the New Perspective of being too idealistic, arguing that its focus on marginalized voices detracted from hard-hitting journalism. Others dismissed it as a fleeting trend, predicting that it wouldn't survive the competitive media landscape. Some even suggested that Karoline's prominence overshadowed the work of her contributors. While these criticisms occasionally weighed on her, Karoline refused to let them dictate her path. Instead, she doubled down on her mission, using feedback, both positive and negative, to refine and strengthen the platform. Amidst the whirlwind of professional achievements, Karoline also prioritized personal growth. She spent weekends volunteering at local shelters, tutoring students in underserved areas, and participating in community cleanup projects. These experiences kept her connected to the real-world issues she wrote about, reminding her of the humanity behind every headline. They also provided a much-needed sense of balance, helping her recharge and maintain perspective in an increasingly chaotic world. Perhaps the most poignant moment of this phase came during a surprise visit from Schiff himself. By now, Schiff had publicly acknowledged that his earlier dismissal of Karoline had been a misstep, praising her for her contributions to journalism and public dialogue. When he reached out to request a meeting, Karoline hesitated, but ultimately agreed, curious to hear what he had to say. Over coffee at a quiet cafe, Schiff expressed admiration for her resilience and thanked her for pushing him to reflect on his own biases. "You've reminded me, and many others, that listening is just as important as leading," he admitted. The conversation ended amicably, with both parties agreeing to collaborate on initiatives promoting transparency and civic engagement. News of their reconciliation spread quickly, sparking discussions about the importance of humility and open-mindedness in leadership. Critics, initially skeptical of Karoline's intentions, softened their stance, recognizing her willingness to engage constructively with those who had once doubted her. Allies praised her ability to turn adversaries into partners, further solidifying her reputation as a bridge builder in polarized times. Looking back on everything she had accomplished, Karoline couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude for the challenges that had tested her resolve, for the supporters who had believed in her when she doubted herself, and for the countless individuals whose stories she had helped amplify. She knew that her journey was far from over. There were still battles to fight, injustices to expose, and voices to uplift. But she faced the future with optimism, confident that she had built a foundation strong enough to withstand whatever lay ahead. In the end, Karoline Leavitt's story was more than just a tale of triumph over adversity. It was a testament to the transformative power of speaking truth to power. Her response to Schiff hadn't merely changed her life, It had ignited a spark that lit up entire communities, inspiring others to embrace their potential and challenge the status quo. As she stood on the precipice of new beginnings, one thing was certain. Karoline's legacy would endure not because of the fame or recognition she achieved, but because of the lives she touched and the change she inspired. And for Karoline, that was the greatest victory of all.